I was right. I've only been making One Piece theories for about 2 months now, and I've already got one. Because the second that Scopper Bragon cut through Saint Summer's arm, taking from him his Mark of the Abyss and seemingly stripping of him of all of his Abyss-based powers, I had a feeling that Oda, that gorgeous genius, would tie it all back into Chapter 1 of this manga. And wouldn't you know it, lo and behold, with the rough leaks of Chapter 1152 out, it seems as though when I stated that Shanks lost his arm on purpose, I nailed it, as Chapter 1152 has revealed that 14 years ago, before Shanks went back to the East Blue and lost his arm, saving Luffy, he had on the arm that he lost, his left arm, the Mark of the Abyss. But Nick, is this entire video gonna be a dedicated victory lap? No. See, because now that we understand that Shanks lost his arm on purpose, we have to answer the question of why he lost his arm on purpose. And Chapter 1152 also supplies us with that answer. An answer that tells us that Shanks was once a prophetic child who was supposed to fill the role of possibly living as the next incarnation of Nika, but he passed the buck to Luffy intentionally. Yes, Shanks is the reason that Luffy is the main character of One Piece, and there's evidence to back that up. So with no further ado, let's get directly into Shanks is the mastermind of everything in One Piece. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video a week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the written part of the tuning exams, and 1010 is cheating with mirrors. But before we get into all that, today we're gonna talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, BetterHelp. As we approach the beginning of summer and the end of a lot of school years, it feels like probably to many of you that you have no idea what's to come. Is it a college? Is it a job? Is it further education? A PhD? A master's? Who knows? And as you reflect on these changing times in your life, do you ever look in yourself and realize that it might be mucking up your mental health just a little bit? Well, that's where BetterHelp wants to step in and give you a hand. See, a therapist will listen, ask questions, and help you see things from new perspectives. They can give you advice and techniques that help you better your life on a day-to-day basis. And for those of you who think therapy is unattainable, well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. So all you have to do is go to BetterHelp.com, fill out a questionnaire, and within a couple of days, you'll be matched to a therapist who matches your exact needs and wants. On top of that, if you're matched to a therapist who doesn't exactly match what you're looking for, you can switch at any time for no additional cost. And with over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a company you can trust. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in my description or go to betterhelp.com/weebcommander to get 10% off your first month of therapy. There's no such thing as a bad time to start your mental health journey. So a couple of weeks ago, like I alluded to early in this video, we theorized that Shanks lost his arm on purpose. Really, regardless of how you look at Chapter 1 of One Piece, it makes no sense that Shanks would lose his arm to the Guardian of the Coast. The same Guardian of the Coast that he was able to scare off with a simple stare, and the same Guardian of the Coast that Luffy was able to knock out with one punch in a dinghy before he unlocked the second gear. There's really no logical explanation to the idea that the weakest version of Luffy we ever saw would be able to knock out something that could injure Shanks. And thus people for years have been trying to scramble to figure out why Shanks would lose his arm to the Guardian of the Coast. Was it diseased? Was it a disease that wiped out Law's entire island? Did he have an embarrassing tattoo that he didn't want Makino to see so he could crack later that night? Or more recently than anything, did he have an abyssal mark that tied him to the world government? A theory that came around recently when it was A, revealed that his father was Figurlin Garling, who's now one of the 5 elders, and therefore he has a twin brother Shamrock, who is a holy knight, and B, when Shamrock revealed that at one point Shanks did return back to Marie Joie, which would serve as an incredible time to get marked with an abyssal mark. But now it's obviously been revealed that the reason that he gave up his arm to the Lord of the Coast was because of the latest theory. Because he wanted to sever his connection to the world government. Or at least that's our current, most prominent, and most likely theory. Because as it's been seen very recently, a connection to the world government through the power of the abyssal mark, while incredibly powerful and useful in certain situations, as it allows you to do insane things like teleport, possibly undergo monstrous devil fruit transformations like all of the 5 elders, or even have Emu take over your body as a pseudo puppet so you can wipe out entire entire islands with your Conqueror's Haki, those powers do inherently tie you back to Emu and the world's government, and thus the possibility of being beholden to the idea and the wants of the world's government through the connection with this mark is most likely the reason that Shanks decided to get rid of his arm, especially when you consider the fact that he wanted to be a pirate, and Emu can seemingly kill anybody with the abyssal mark really whenever they want to, as was seen with Saint Saturn when they returned from Egghead Island. Okay, so the general idea as to why Shanks wanted to get rid of his arm is because he wanted to sever his connection to the world government. That seems pretty simple and easy, right? And yeah, if you want to look at it from a mile away, that is kind of what happened, or at least what we're theorizing to happen. However, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. See, we obviously understand that Shanks was found on God Valley, an island that was not so ceremoniously wiped off the map 38 years ago. But because the God Valley incident not only featured the Holy Knights, the Celestial Dragons, the Rocks Pirates, and the Rogers Pirates, but also Garp, it is a moment in history of incredible turmoil and violence that led somehow, some way, Shanks falling into the hands of the Goldie Roger Pirates, who raised him until eventually, for some reason or another, Shanks decided to return back to Marie Joie. Now, as to why Shanks did this after being raised by the most notorious pirate in all of mankind, we don't really know. It could be for a multitude of reasons. Shanks could have gone back to Marie Joie to try and connect with his father and brother, to pull at some of the strings of his own identity to figure out who he is and why he was placed on God Valley. He could have been sent back as a scout of sorts by Goldie Roger himself, who wanted to leverage the existing connection he had to Marie Joie to see what was going on with people like Emu and the Five Elders and the Holy Knights. Or in the most altruistic possibility, Shanks could have been going back to Marie Joie to try and convince his father and his brother to switch to the side of not the world's government, I guess the pirates, or just the good guys. However, regardless of the reason that Shanks decided to go back to Marie Joie, it appears as though while he was in Marie Joie, he either elected to get an abyssal mark or had one forced upon him. And I believe the latter is more likely, because while there is a possibility that Fingerling Garling told Shanks that with this mark you'll be able to achieve all the power you've ever wanted, and that with that power you'll be able to rule over all the pirates in the world, and thus Shanks would be able to assume some kind of warlord-esque role for the Holy Knights and the Five Elders to rule over all the unruly pirates as a undercover kind of pirate. But I think it's more likely that when Shanks returned to Marie Joie, his father saw that he was an unruly child raised by Goldie Roger and figured marking him with the mark of the abyss would not only make sure that he'd be able to keep an eye on him wherever he was, but also make sure that he could keep him in check. As not only would Shanks be able to be controlled by Emu, but his father or any of the other Holy Knights or the Five Elders could possibly teleport to him really whenever they wanted to. And thus the abyssal mark acted as kind of a GPS beacon. Anyways, as to why Shanks ended up getting the Mark of the Abyss isn't really all that important. What is important is that in chapter 1152, we see a flashback 14 years into the past on the day that Loki supposedly killed King Harold, Loki and Hajrudin's father. And in this flashback, not only does Shanks have both of his arms, but on his left arm is the Mark of the Abyss. Now, obviously, on account of the fact that Shanks had both of his arms in this flashback, this obviously happens before Shanks saves Luffy. But not that much before Shanks saves Luffy. See, Luffy right now is 19 years old. Shanks is 39. Shanks saves Luffy from the Sea Beast when he's 6 years old. So do some light math with me here. 14 years ago, when Shanks was supposedly on Elbaf alongside Scopper Gaban, visiting Elbaf because Shanks in his previous travels had met King Harold and had bonded to him, and therefore while he was in the area, he wanted to pop in and say hello to King Harold because he liked him. These are all things that happen in chapter 1152. At this time, Luffy is 5 years old, only 1 year out from being saved by Shanks, who's all the way on the Grand Line towards the end of it at Elbaf. And on this fateful day that Shanks decided to go visit King Harold is supposedly the day that Loki killed him for his legendary devil fruit of Elbaf. Now, for those of you who don't remember, I believe it was chapter 1130 told us that people theorized that the reason that Loki went crazy and killed his father was for the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, a devil fruit that, mind you, has not been revealed to us yet. And while many people ever since the reveal of Loki basically have assumed that Loki killed King Harold and then ate the legendary devil fruit, which is why Loki is so much bigger than his brother Hajrudin and why it took the entire unified forces of Elbaf and Shanks working together to take down Loki so they could tie him to the tree. However, we learn from chapter 1152 that Loki actually didn't kill King Harold, which is a theory that I was gonna film like 2 weeks ago, and then I was like, no, we're gonna talk about Chopper having a mythical Zoid fruit. I knew it was coming. I mean, a lot of people probably knew it was coming. Loki was very much depicted in a good light in chapter 1151. You're like, oh, well, Loki's probably going to be a good guy. Probably didn't kill King Harold. But, you know, sometimes you don't act. And then sometimes everyone's going to be like, oh, well, Nick's just trying to toot his own horn. Because, of course, you can say you had a theory and then it gets proved correct. You get what I'm saying. Anyways, apparently 14 years ago, when Loki went to go protest to his father that he, for some reason, aligned Elbaf with the world's government, he found that King Harold had been stabbed by all of his own soldiers, and that some mysterious figure had stole the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, which seems to imply that Loki did not eat the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf. But who did eat the legendary fruit of Elbaf, and what is it? Well, we don't actually know, like I stated earlier, but people do have theories. People believe that the legendary fruit of Elbaf has Norse mythology tie-ins. Like maybe it's the dog fruit, model Fenrir. Or the most popular theory is that the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf is the human fruit, model Surtur. And I mean, it makes perfect sense. If you know Surtur from Norse mythology, you know Surtur is the biggest of all of the fire giants, the guardian of the Muspelheim, the fire realm in Norse mythology. He's spoken about as one of the most prominent beings in Ragnarok, where it was stated that with his bright sword, he would battle against the gods. And in these battles, he would defeat one of the major gods, I'm not good at Norse, and engulf the worlds in flame and destroy it. And considering the fact that Elbaf seemingly has a gigantic sword stuck in it, a sword that reaches down from the underworld and into the sun world, that's how long it is, and that Loki is one of the largest giants on Elbaf, who is an identified arsonist, proclaiming himself as a sun god, the idea of tying him to Surtur makes a lot of sense. But I would reckon that Loki never got to eat the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, and that's because the legendary fruit of Elbaf had nothing to do with Fenrir, it had nothing to do with Surtur, it had nothing to do with Mjolnir, and everything to do with Nika. See, for the last couple of months, if not almost a year actually, people have hypothesized that the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf is a devil fruit that's passed down from King of Elbaf to King of Elbaf. And considering the fact that devils live for 300 to 400 years, this devil fruit really hasn't been passed down to that many people. And thus, this must be the reason that Loki killed King Harold. Because if King Harold had consumed the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, when Loki killed him, that devil fruit would re-manifest in a nearby fruit. One that Loki could consume and then assume the role of King of Elbaf, free to do with Elbaf whatever he wants. And even if King Harold himself hadn't eaten the legendary devil fruit, it was still the role of the King of Elbaf to defend the devil fruit. And that in itself is where the role comes from. And thus to be King of the Giants is more about protecting the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf than it is leading the giants. And thus my theory is, as it was revealed in this chapter, that 14 years ago, King Harold decided to make a deal with the world government for Elbaf to become an officially recognized island. The second that King Harold allowed for the world government to exist on Elbaf, they killed him in pursuit of the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf. I mean, it was already very clearly stated by Saint Saturn and everybody involved in the Gods Valley incident that high-level devil fruits are often sought out by the world government, specifically so they can be used as gifts and prizes to the celestial dragons and the five elders and the holy knights. But that mission becomes all the more important when you realize that the world government is trying to eliminate another re-emergence of Joy Boy. And thus, of course, they have incentive to try to get to Elbaf, to try to get to the king, to try to get to the legendary devil fruit that he's protecting, because that devil fruit has the ability to reawaken Joy Boy. The reason we haven't gotten a new Joy Boy in 800 or so years is because King Harold himself never consumed the devil fruit. And thus the reason that Loki proclaims himself a sun god is because he believes he should have been the person to consume the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, as he was the prince, the son of the man defending it. And think about it, if it was the role of the King of Elbaf to protect this legendary devil fruit, that explains why another king hasn't stepped up. Sure, obviously, the giants could use a leader, and for the moment they have Chief Jarl. But the reason that the throne has been abdicated ever since King Harold died is because the true purpose of the role, to defend the legendary devil fruit that is the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, is gone now. On top of this, we now know from chapter 1152 that Loki was framed for the death of King Harold, and possibly framed as the person who consumed the legendary devil fruit. But we also learned something very, very interesting from chapter 1152, because in kind of what could be identified as a throwaway line in chapter 1152, Shanks is talking to Scopper about how he wants to start a pirate crew with Buggy. But Scopper tells Shanks that he can't do that because Shanks is the destined boy. Now, if you think for even a second about what that could could possibly mean, essentially what Scopper appears to be telling Shanks here right now, is that you are the one who's destined to eat the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, that it was red hair Shanks that was supposed to consume the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And while a lot of you are saying, yeah, Nick, we've known this for like literally 20 plus years, that's why Shanks stole the devil fruit. That's why Shanks was surprised that Luffy ate the devil fruit. This seems to be telling us that Scopper knows for some reason that Shanks is a prophetic character in the One Piece lore. And it's at this point that it's important to note that Scopper has been to Laugh Tale. Scopper hypothetically knows everything that happened in the Void Century. He knows the secrets of the world. And thus at the end of the world at Laugh Tale is a possibility that the Gold D. Roger pirates received some kind of prophetic message that told them that Shanks was supposed to be the next Joy Boy. And therefore, because Shanks needed to be the next Joy Boy, the freer of slaves, the sun god reincarnation, he didn't have time to go be a pirate with Buggy. And therefore, there is a fair to decent chance that the reason that Shanks pulled up on Elbaf on that fateful day 14 days ago when King Harold was killed was because he was there to collect the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, and become the next reincarnation of Joy Boy. Think about it, the idea that the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf is the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika makes so much sense when you consider the fact that the original Joy Boy was a giant. We know from the gigantic straw hat that Emu has sitting in a refrigerator of sorts that the original Joy Boy, the silhouette of whom we've seen hanging out with the Iron Giant, was huge. Now, how huge we can't necessarily say. Was he Buccaneer sized? Was he Big Mom sized? Was he giant sized? The silhouette we see of him hanging out with the Iron Giant doesn't really make him seem like he's all that large. The giant straw hat that Emu has makes us believe that he was giant sized. So what is it? But Joy Boy being from Elbaf makes a lot of sense. I mean, their upper world is called the Sun World. Their children paint murals in their libraries that depict things like sea gods and earth gods and sky gods, and most importantly, the sun god battling against gigantic devils. The idea of the sun god is deeply ingrained into Elbaf. And therefore, if the sun god fruit came from Elbaf, yeah, that'd make a fair amount of sense. However, on the day that Shanks wanted to pull up to Elbaf to acquire his legendary fruit was the day that said legendary fruit was stolen, presumably by CP0 and Who's Who, which is why in the immediacy before Shanks headed back to the East Blue, he hunted down Who's Who, raided his ship, and stole that legendary devil fruit back from the government, forever tarnishing Who's Who's name and forcing them into a life of piracy, but accomplishing essentially what was foretold possibly to the Gold D. Roger pirates at Laugh Tale. But before Shanks, who, mind you, had the straw hat before Luffy, could eat that legendary devil fruit and become this generation's Joy Boy, Luffy ate it. And I believe that was intentional. See, Shanks is one of the most intelligent people in One Piece. He is an Emperor of the Sea. His IQ is next level. Not only did he understand the importance of the devil fruit he just stole from CP0, he clearly understands the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that it's taken over the last 1,000 years to keep that fruit safe and in the right hands. And yet, when this man, who just watched the literal king of Elbaf get murdered over this devil fruit, got back to the East Blue, he decided to leave this incredibly important and valuable devil fruit that he could have eaten at any time, mind you, in an open crate on the counter next to the kid that you know damn well will eat anything. So what seems more likely to you? That Shanks, who was apparently the prophetic child who was supposed to be the reincarnation of Joy Boy and free the world from the world's government, as told to him by all the people whom he most definitely respected more than anybody else on Earth, his fellow Gold D. Roger pirates, decided to sail this legendary devil fruit that could be consumed, stolen, or lost at any point along the journey, all the way back at East Blue after having a party and hanging out with all of his pirates, saying hey to Luffy, scruffing his hair, when he could have eaten it the second he stole it from Who's Who, rather decided that fulfilling his prophecy could literally wait until he was in the correct mood to consume a devil fruit and start his journey. Or do we believe that it's maybe, just maybe, more likely that Shanks didn't want to be Joy Boy? I mean, in chapter 1152, he literally states that he wants to be the head of a pirate crew with Buggy. And Scopper says, nah, you can't do that. You got more important things to do. Well, what if he didn't? See, it appears as though Shanks is a more complicated character than we give him credit for. He comes from a family of holy knights who undoubtedly want him to be a holy knight. He's adopted into a family of legendary pirates who want him to be the prophetic Joy Boy who frees the world from the world's government. But all Shanks wants to do is lead a pirate crew with his best friend, Buggy. And thus Shanks, who knew Gold D. Roger better than most people on account of the fact that he was literally raised by the man, saw so much of Gold D. Roger in Luffy in terms of demeanor and desire to be a pirate that he decided that if anybody should be the next reincarnation of Joy Boy, it should be the person who's closest to Gold D. Roger in this upcoming generation. Luffy. And thus Shanks in Chapter 1 not only sets up a scenario in which Luffy will consume the Hito Hito no Mi Madonika, making him the next hopeful reincarnation of Joy Boy, which is why Shanks gives him his straw hat in the first place, but also in that very same chapter has his left arm chopped off while saving that up-and-coming savior of the world to sever his connection from the world's government. See, not only does Shanks pawn off his prophecy to Luffy, but he also severs his connection to his father and his twin brother. Also, he can go out and do exactly what he wants to, which is just be a pirate. I mean, Shanks has future sight. And while I don't know if Shanks was using observation hockey while Luffy was eating the devil fruit that he was supposedly supposed to eat, you'd like to assume that Shanks' spidey senses would kick in when somebody else was literally consuming the thing that he had to battle the world government for. So why was King Harold killed? Well, because he was protecting the devil fruit that would one day bring back Joy Boy. Loki was framed because he walked in at the wrong time. CP0 made it look as though Loki did it. Shanks was possibly controlled through the power of his abyssal mark to make it appear as though Loki was responsible for the death of King Harold, which is why Shanks has been stated to be responsible for the defeating of Loki. And then upon realizing what he had done and what he was responsible for, he decided to track down the legendary fruit of Elbaf because it was his prophecy to consume it and not the world government's. But upon yoinking it off CP0 and Who's Who, realizing that he was being pulled in two different directions, neither of which he liked, he decided to sever his arm, which drew a connection to Emu, but also get rid of the devil fruit that drew his connection to the Gold D. Roger pirates. Also, he could exist as simply red-haired Shanks. But what do I know? I've only been doing this for 2 months. But what do you guys think? Do you think the Hito Hito no Mi Madonika was the legendary fruit of Elbaf? Do you think Shanks purposely pawned off the legacy of becoming the next generation's Joy Boy and severed his connection to the world's government in the same chapter? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Oh, there's no better feeling than being right.